right, so this week we're all focusing, or all of the recipes are focusing on vegetarian options. So we have done a lot of baked items and they are so, so good, but we had to give a little bit of a break on some of that stuff. So this week what we're going to be doing is, we've got the black bean recipe for the patties or for the burgers. We've got a vegetables quesadilla, and this recipe is for fresh salsa, which is so, so awesome, so amazing. And if you happen not to get your mom anything for Mother's Day, this works really, really well, okay? So for fresh salsa, what you're gonna need to do is make sure that you've got your tomatoes, you've got your fresh lime, and again, if you don't have fresh lime, it tastes the best, but you can always use lime juice as well, store-bought, okay? You've got your pepper, and I've also provided the recipe for the chips that we usually do in the grade 6 labs for that black bean salsa, but this is tomato salsa. So for all those people that were like, all my kids and students that were like, why can't we make real salsa? This is real salsa, okay? The other thing you're gonna want to make sure you've got is jalapenos, unless that's too spicy. So what I usually recommend for jalapenos is to get the store-bought pickled ones because they are less spicy, okay? But if spice is just not your friend, leave them out. You're still gonna be okay. All right, so I'm gonna hold up my recipe. This is, of course, for the salsa, and then this is for the baked chips. Okay. So, what I'm actually going to do is start off with the salsa, which might seem a little bit weird because we are baking something, and usually when I time it, I bake first. The reason why is because when you make fresh salsa, you really want to make sure that those flavors have time to meld together. Because it becomes so much better. So usually when you make fresh salsa, what I recommend you do is let it sit for at least 30 minutes to overnight in order for all those flavors to really come together and just be so, so good, okay? So, I actually just realized I'm missing some ingredients. Let's try that, and what? Okay. So what I'm going to do is start off by chopping up my stuff and by juicing my lime. Now, if you have not seen my knife safety video, you need to make sure that you watch it before you even start doing this lab. Knife safety is going to be paramount for this lab, and you want to make sure that you keep all of your limbs intact. Okay? So I am going to take my lime and I'm going to juice it. Before I juice it, that's my oven. I'm actually just going to roll my lime, and this is hopefully going to just bring some of the juice out. Okay, now it says half a lime juiced, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use half of the lime for this salsa, and then I'm going to use the other half of the lime for the mixture I'm going to make for my chips. But if you end up juicing the lime and you don't want to do the chips, just use all of it. Like I love lime and salsa. It's so, so good. So this is going to be my juicer. This is a citrus press, okay? Hopefully you have one of these. Juicing a lime is really, really hard without it. So I'm really hopeful that you have that. Again, if not, just use lime juice, okay? So I'm just going to cut off my ends. Slice this in half. I have to cut off a bit more of it there. Right, I'm going to press this. And if you wanted to, afterwards, if you were drinking water, you could always cut this in half and then put it in your water. It makes for a really good lime flavored water. Okay, so I've got my half there, and that's for my salsa. Now, again, because I love lime, I'm actually going to cook the entire thing in. And I bought an extra lime just for this too. start chopping up my other veg. So tomatoes, again, you can get like cherry tomatoes from the store and then just cut them in half or cut them in quarters. For tomatoes, when you're chopping them up, you need to make sure that your knife is really sharp so that you don't end up like flattening them, okay? So I'm just gonna rinse these off. And I'm gonna start dicing these. So I am gonna chop it in half just to make sure that it's easy. I've got a flat surface. I'm slicing down and then I'm gonna dice across. And tomatoes are very slippery. Sometimes they can be a little bit hard. And again, you wanna make sure that your knife is doing the work, okay? So I don't wanna smush my tomatoes while I'm doing this. So I'm just gonna put that in there. And I'm gonna grab the other half of my tomato. And again, just slice down. Turn and claw. I always find tomato one of the hardest things to chop. Some of you guys, I'm sure, are whizzing through this. Okay. I'm gonna put that in there. Now, if you are not a huge fan of tomato, or if you don't have fresh tomatoes, you can also use diced tomatoes. So what I would do with diced tomatoes is I would get some of the juice off, and then use the diced tomatoes just as diced tomatoes, not the juice with it for the salsa, if that makes sense. So that's another option with this. But honestly, fresh tomatoes make the best salsa. Okay? So I've got my 2 tomatoes in there. To that, I'm actually going to add my green bell pepper. A lot of people don't tend to eat green bell peppers. I don't know why. It does have a different taste than a red or an orange sweet pepper. But I really like the taste. So for this, I'm going to slice it again. Oh, it smells so good. And I'm going to turn it and then dice it. I'm going to add that in. Motorcycle, gotta love it. And again, I want to make sure that I'm going against the flat side of the surface. My hands are clear. And just dice. And your goal is to make sure that they're all uniform in size because you don't want extra large chunks. You should be okay. All right, so I've got my tomato, my green pepper. The last thing I'm gonna add in is my onion. Okay, so I am gonna mince this. Now, for my onions, usually with my onions, I keep them into the fridge, and that actually prevents me from crying when I end up slicing them. When you let your onions be at room temperature, that's when you actually start to tear up when you slice them. So it's really important on where you're going to keep it. If you find that you cry a lot, you can always wear goggles or sunglasses. But I find that if you put them in the fridge, you won't have it. Not as much of an issue. And to mince, I'm just going to slice very thinly along the grain of the onion. And I'm going to turn it and slice it. Oh, this onion did not work out, my friends. Then, since I am going to be mincing it, I'm just going to go along. And if you are not a huge fan of onion, you don't have to do all of this. You could just do like a quarter. It's more than enough. And I would pick a small onion for this recipe. You just want like the taste and not like massive raw chunks of onion in your salsa. So I'm actually, I think now that I've chopped this, I'm only gonna use half. And I'll use the rest for lunch later. All right, I'm now gonna grab my jalapenos. So for my jalapenos, I'm just gonna take them out, drain them off. The spiciest part of the jalapeno is the seeds, okay? So if you're not a huge fan, make sure you don't have the seeds. The other thing is when we chop up jalapenos, we wanna make sure that we do not touch our hands afterwards, okay? Jalapenos, if they get on your face, burn, right? So if you're using fresh jalapenos, what I actually usually recommend you do is wear gloves, all right? And that's to make sure that no matter what, you don't get any traces of it. I don't know how many of you guys have ever gotten jalapeno in your eye. It burns so badly, okay? So when you are chopping up jalapenos, please, please, please make sure that you're watching and you're washing your hands afterwards really, really well, and you chop up the jalapenos the last thing on your cutting board. Okay, so I'm gonna mince up my jalapenos. And a little goes a long way. So I only have 2 pieces of pickled jalapenos. And then I will put it into my salsa. So now that I've chopped that up, I'm gonna stir. And then I'm gonna wash my hands. So I've got my jalapenos in there, I've got my tomatoes, I've got my green pepper, I have got my onion. So from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add 1 milliliter of cumin. My cumin kind of exploded. So I have the amount here. So I'm gonna put that in. I'm going to add in my lime juice. I'm going to put in my salt and pepper. So it says 1 milliliter. So I'm only gonna do about 3 twists. And the last thing I'm gonna do is cilantro. Now, cilantro, I am not a huge fan of cilantro. You either love it or you don't. And I will put it in some stuff. So salsa is like one of the only things I will put it into. And so usually when I buy cilantro, I actually end up getting the seasoning paste because I find it lasts longer than the fresh cilantro, and I don't use fresh cilantro a lot. So this paste is not too bad. Of course, fresh cilantro is gonna taste better. Okay, so if you guys love fresh cilantro, put it in, that's not a problem. But I am just gonna use the paste, and I'm only gonna do a small amount because again, I'm not a huge fan, okay? So, I'm actually just gonna put a small amount on here, and then I'm gonna mix it in. But if you had the cilantro, what you would do is you would take most of the leaves and you would mince it up on your cutting board, and that would be before you did your jalapenos. I'm gonna let this sit now, and I'm gonna focus on my other stuff. So, just doing the salsa and you were not doing the chips, this is where you would stop it. You're done. Congratulations, you guys did awesome. Okay. Again, let it sit for a little bit before you serve it. Overnight is really the preference. That's kind of what I prefer. So I made this today. I will enjoy it tomorrow, which happens to be Thursday. But for you guys, if you guys are doing the chips, that's where we're starting. Okay, so for the chips, you're gonna preheat your oven to 350 Quebec, which I've actually already done because I wanted to speed this process along. I'm going to get my tacos. So I ended up getting corn tacos for this. There goes my towel. I ended up getting corn tacos for this, and I said 2 to 4, and that's usually the big tacos, but because I have the little baby ones, I'm actually gonna do 8. Okay, so I am going to take my bowl that I had my lime juice in, and I'm gonna start mixing my stuff. If I wanted to, I could definitely squeeze another lime, but what I'm actually gonna do for this one is just use my lime juice because I've got it. So for the first one, I'm gonna take my 15. To that, I'm going to add in 5 milliliters of olive oil. And again, I'm measuring it over something else before. I'm going to take some more cumin, which I will grab, and then some chili powder. So I only need 1 milliliter of chili powder. See if I can find another cumin. So I am going to do 2 milliliters of cumin. Next, I'm going to take my pastry brush. If I do not have a pastry brush at home, I can 100% use a knife, okay? Just a butter knife. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread it thin, not a lot, onto all of these and restack them. Now, again, if you don't have a pastry brush, the other option is to dip these, which you totally could with the small ones, but it doesn't work as well with the large ones. So if you needed to, you could always slice these up first and then just dip the chips. And you should have just enough. Okay, so I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut it in half. Okay, I'm then going to take it one more time and cut it in half. And then I've got these little chips that I'm going to bake. Now, they are not going to crisp up as much as a deep fryer chip would. Okay, so factor that in. But they taste really, really good. And they're awesome if you run out of tortilla chips. Now, because I'm making so many, and if you guys ended up cutting them into 8s instead of 4s, you will. You can try overlapping them. Just try to make sure that you have enough like showing so that they do bake, okay? All right. I'm gonna grab my oven, and I'm gonna place this in. And I am going to be baking them for 5 minutes first side, and then 3 to 5 minutes for the second, okay? After I've got the first side, I'm going to, I can take tongs, or you can take your fingers and you can just flip them. The other thing you can do is just grab a flipper and flip all of them, and that's basically you baking both sides. Once you're done that, you're gonna put them onto, you're gonna let them cool. And as they cool, they will crisp up, okay? But please make sure you separated them. So if they're stacked, unstack them. You can do this by putting it onto a cooling rack, just so you've got the air to go into them. And again, as they cool, they will crisp, okay? So out of the oven, they're still gonna be super soft, and that's totally normal. As they air dry though, they will crisp up, okay? So, we'll see hopefully how this works out, but salsa, chips, is there anything better? Not really. Okay, stay cooking, Timberwolves. This is the demo for now. And then next week, I'll see you what else we can concoct.